This is for our first product, which is called Telepathy, which enables you to control a computer or a phone just by thinking.
Elon Musk and the Neuralink team just released an insane interview where they update us on new features coming to Neuralink and how AI plays a role. These are almost sci-fi level advancements which include telepathy, or interacting with devices with your brain, and even a cure for blindness and so much more. You won't want to miss out on this awesome video that many people have not seen. We will break down the video and explain what is going on while giving our thoughts on it. Let's get into it.
So our first product is something, like I said, we call Telepathy, which enables the person with the Neuralink implant to control their phone or computer just by thinking. And once you can control your phone and computer, you can essentially control almost anything, literally just by thinking. So there's no eye tracking or anything. It is purely your thoughts. This is really quite a profound device that can help a lot of people who have lost the connection between their brain and body.
Telepathy in this case isn't human-to-human communication, but rather human-to-device communication. However, in the future, it very well may be between Neuralink users. Being able to interact with digital devices may lead to a future where people who aren't injured will opt to have this implanted into them. This will be for the benefit of being able to do things faster and without physical input. Later on, we're going to show footage of a Neuralink patient playing a video game with just their brain.
So imagine people like Stephen Hawking, who, imagine if he could communicate at the same speed as someone who still had the connection to their brain and body. So it's really something that can help millions of people around the world, and it's part of our overall goal of enabling a very high bandwidth connection between the brain and the rest of the world and your computers. The long-term goal, which sounds a little esoteric, is to mitigate the risk of the civilizational risk of AI by having a sort of closer symbiosis between human intelligence and digital intelligence.
Incorporating technology into us, we will be mitigating the possibility of AI overtaking humanity by essentially integrating ourselves with the technology. Personally, I think it's a crazy time that we are in, because in the next 50 years, we may have the ability to literally become a cyborg, just like in sci-fi movies, which is pretty wild. But there's even more coming up that will shock you.
Along the way, we're going to help solve a lot of brain injury or spinal injury issues. And with our first product, Telepathy, that's going to be really quite profound. There is also potential long-term for bridging the gap. So if there are damaged or severed neurons, being able to span the gap between the brain's motor cortex to the spine to enable someone to use their body again.
So what Elon Musk is talking about is having two Neuralinks, having one above and below the broken area of the spine, and they communicate with each other similarly to how its spine interacts naturally with the brain, essentially repairing the highway of information. This would allow a person to receive the signals to their arms and legs and give them the opportunity to walk again as if they weren't paralyzed. I'm glad that this is going to help so many people, and honestly, it's a crazy advancement for humanity going forward.
A second product, which we've demonstrated to work with monkeys, is blindsight, which would enable someone who is completely blind or lost both eyes or completely lost their optic nerve to be able to see.
This is truly a crazy breakthrough for people who have lost the ability to see. Am I the only one who finds this really cool? Imagine all humans being able to have control of all of their senses, even if they have lost them at some time in the past. This is truly some alien technology.
So this just gives you a sense of what the device is. A way to think about the Neuralink device is kind of like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch with tiny wires or electrodes. Those tiny wires are implanted in the brain, and they read and write electrical signals. So a lot of people think the brain is this incredibly mysterious thing. It is mysterious in a lot of ways, but it is actually it does operate with electrical signals. So if you can read and write those electrical signals, you can interface with the brain. And the device is sized so that it is the same size as the piece of skull that is removed. So if it's like a few centimeters diameter of skull that's removed, we replace that with the device after implanting the tiny wires with the surgical robot, and that enables read-write capability to the neurons.
Completely wirelessly.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. It's completely wirelessly. So, like, I could have a Neuralink right now. You wouldn't know. And it charges inductively, so you could just basically have an electromagnetic pad that you charge the device with.
The ability for it to be wireless is unique because brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs for short, historically have been wired and were unable to be wireless. Being able to charge it inductively, similar to putting a phone on a charging pad and waiting for your Neuralink to charge, is pretty cool. I don't know if you're seeing the pattern here, but this interview is filled with some new tech advancements, and there's even more to come, and they're pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, so our first step with the telepathy is basically to unlock digital independence for people with paralysis and to allow them to control the computer just with their mind without moving their body. And our goal is to provide them the same level of control, functionality, and reliability that I have when I'm using a computer. Even better than the level of control I have. And
it's not a high bar for you. Actually, just to be clear, this guy, he's controlling this with his brain. So he's not, like, you can't see his hands in this video, but he's not using a mouse and keyboard. He's just, thinking about how to move the cursor and playing Civilization 6.
No eye tracker.
Right, there's no eye tracking.
From thoughts.
He's live streaming it. Like, you can go watch this on Twitter.
Just thinking. That's it.
Just thinking.
This is just a couple days ago.
Cursor move here.
Yeah.
he's streaming that live and also can talk and move his head without any problem, multitasking.
Yeah, you can also, if you join this live stream, you can ask him questions. He'll tell you all about what it's like to move the brain.
Also, I think, I haven't played Civilization myself, but I think this is actually not easy mode. This is expert mode.
This is Emperor mode. Yeah.
Emperor mode. Yes.
If you have played Civ, Emperor mode is the highest difficulty level. Just the point is, this is a cognitively demanding task while live streaming, playing the hardest mode of the game. And he's able to do that while moving the cursor.
Talking, engaging with the audience while playing games.
What Neuralink is going for here is not only to control devices with your mind, but to make it so it's just as efficient or even more efficient than using your limbs. It's impressive that they are able to use their brain to talk on their livestream chat while continuing to play the game at a high level without the Neuralink getting confused. It is able to perfectly read his brainwaves and thought patterns accurately. It's very impressive.
So also another cool stuff about our device is that we can use it anywhere, anytime. Also on a plane, during a flight, while creating really cool memes of cats. Also, our device unlocks things that previously were impossible for our participant. For example, we're able to connect him to his gaming console, Switch, and play Mario Kart with friends and family. And it was lovely to see them playing together after years that he couldn't do it since his injury.
Imagine if you're sitting one row over from this guy on a plane. You look over, he's making a cat meme. No hands, no movement. Yeah,
and he loves using the device and using independently daily to watch videos, read, play games, using the browser. And the key metrics that we care is to make sure our device is actually useful is basically the amount of hours you use the device daily and weekly, and we track it weekly since the surgery. And on weeks that he's not too busy and not traveling, he can even reach 70 hours of using the device a week. This is amazing. He would, of course, love to use it more, but need to run research sessions. He needs to sleep sometimes, and also, of course, to charge the device once in a while. Hopefully, we'll improve that over time.
I think that maybe not obvious to people who are watching this. It's a normal MacBook he's controlling. This isn't like some limited edition thing where there's only a few options. He can just do anything that you can do on a MacBook Pro. Same one I have on my desk, actually. It's the exact same one.
And maybe another interesting point is that on the first day he used BCI, brain control, he was able to break the previous world record for cursor control just by using the brain. And recently he even doubled it and was able to outperform about 10% of our engineered Neuralink. And you can be sure that we are very good in this game and very quick. And if you want to check out how well you can do it on our website. And it's very addictive game.
Yeah, it's a very simple game. You just have to click on the square, but it's actually, even though it sounds silly, it's quite a it can be quite it sounds like it can be quite addictive, and it's especially if you get a low score and you think there's no way I gotta So I mean, anyone who wants to try this, I recommend going to the Neuralink.com website and seeing if you can beat Nolan's record. And you will find that it's actually quite difficult to do so.
Based on his usage patterns, it goes to show that it is improving his life, and he's even using it upwards of 70 hours per week. It's impressive that their first iteration allowed him to beat this game's world record by 2 times more than the previous record using the BCI. Imagine what the next 10 years of iterations will allow us to do. If you want to try for yourself, the link is on the screen, or it's just neuralink.com/webgrid.
That's part of the long-term goal of improving the bandwidth of the brain-computer interface. If you think about like how low the bandwidth normally is between a human and a device, the average bandwidth is extremely low. It's I said less than 1 bit per second over the course of a day. So if there are 86,400 seconds in a day, you're outputting less than that number of bits to any given device, except in perhaps very rare circumstances. So this is actually quite important for AI. Basically for human AI symbiosis is just being able to communicate at a speed the AI can follow.
Again, Elon is mentioning our integration with AI in the future. Clearly, he is a big believer that AI will eventually become intertwined in our everyday life all the time.
Performing at this extremely high level with about 15% of his channels functional. And so we want to mitigate any of the problems that led to that situation. So, the brain is a fascinating organ. I'll share with you some of the secrets about the brain. During any typical brain surgery, a small amount of air is introduced into the skull. That's because neurosurgeons like to have as much room as possible around the brain. And so there's this little known control mechanism of allowing the CO2 concentration in the blood to rise a bit, which allows the brain to either expand or contract depending on where you target that CO2. So typically neurosurgeons will have the brain shrink by lowering CO2. What we're going to do in our future surgeries is keep the CO2 concentration actually quite normal, maybe even slightly elevated, and that'll allow the brain to stay its normal size and shape during surgery. That should eliminate this air pocket that we saw in the first participant. That air pocket, we think, may have contributed to eating up some of the thread slack as the air bubble migrated to be under the implant, push the brain away from the implant. And so that's easy enough to fix.
In this first iteration, slowly over time, the threads started to become detached, which led to him being at 15% operational status instead of the 100% originally. And even then, he is still performing well. The threads detached mainly because of the air pocket that developed during the initial brain surgery. However, they already have a plan to fix this issue in the future.
Another consideration that we want to focus on for our upcoming participants is that the brain, think of it like a really complex folded onion. It's layer upon layer of sheets of neurons all over the surface of the brain, folded into this odd-looking shape. The folds of the brain travel down deep into the brain, and along with it go those onion layers of neurons. And if we insert very close to one of the folds, where there may be very useful information encoded in neurons, we may end up traveling with our threads parallel to some of the layers of neurons that we're most interested in, avoiding them entirely. To avoid that possibility, we're going to insert in our future participants more close to the middle of the apex of the folds, ensuring that we're crossing the layers of interest, layer 5 of the cortex.
I also think that it's important to highlight here those tiny wires that Elon mentioned. They're a fraction of a human hair. They're very flexible, intentionally so, because brain's constantly moving, and you want the electrodes to be moving with the brain, causing less of the scarring. And it's actually impossible for a human neurosurgeon, however talented Matthew is, to actually maneuver them by hand. So we have a surgical robot that we built that can actually precisely target them in any three-dimensional space, X, Y, as well as Z, with micron-level precision, while avoiding vasculature so that you don't disrupt and cause immune response from happening. So we actually have the technology to be able to place them exactly where we want them.
Yeah, it was truly amazing to see the surface of the brain after the robot had inserted all the electrodes on the first participant without a drop of blood in sight. It was really quite an achievement.
They learned from their first patient and will more accurately place the threads, which are a fraction of the diameter of a human hair, in the correct location that they learned has the most potential for optimal usage. It's pretty crazy to think that a neural surgeon cannot complete this procedure and it has to be done robotically, again showing how much technology is advancing before our very eyes.
Pretty much know exactly where the part of the brain is that controls your right hand and your left hand and your leg and that kind of thing. Or vision. It's actually quite precisely located. It's not. Some people might think look at the brain like, oh, it could be anywhere, but actually your brain is highly differentiated, even though it doesn't look it.
We can put a patient that is considering this implant into an fMRI, so a functional magnetic resonance imaging machine, and ask them to imagine hand movements that, because of the spinal cord injury don't happen. But just imagining those hand movements causes these areas of the brain to light up in the fMRI scanner. And so we have a pretty good idea, based in fact, for each individual participant, which part of their brain is going to respond to imagined movements of the hand.
It's really interesting to see how with technology we're able to tell how the brain looks crafted or created purposefully, as each section handles something different. They simply watch which areas are active and know where to put the implant threads, thus giving them the ability to use those areas of the brain again.
Okay, another aspect of the human brain that obviously differs from any of the animals that we tested in is that the human brain is a lot bigger, and so you may not realize that means the human brain moves quite a bit more than any of these other smaller brained creatures. And so when we open the skull, we see the brain travel toward and away from the robot about 3 millimeters in total as the heart beats and the breathing takes place. And so that movement, it adds a small challenge for the robot in precisely choosing a depth to insert each thread. It's not an enormous challenge, and we've already upgraded the robot's capabilities to be able to even more precisely target depth in even a very rapidly moving brain with a high amplitude of movement.
It's cool to learn that the brain actually pulsates and moves around 3 millimeters as the heart beats. It's probably something that you would have gone your whole life without knowing if you didn't watch this video. It's truly miraculous that they are able to create a machine that can implant a thread of a fraction of a human hair into the brain without any foreseeable damage.
You may think the most obvious mitigation for threads that pulled out of the brain is to insert them deeper. We think so too. And so we're going to broaden the range of depths at which we insert threads. So, for the very first participant, we had an enormous amount of data from our animal work, and we had very highly optimized our insertion depth to maximize the crossing of the layers of interest in the cortex with the electrodes that we're recording from. Now that we know retraction is a possibility, we're going to insert at a variety of depths that even in several cases of differing amounts of retracting threads, we're going to have electrodes at the proper depth. And with the deepest threads, be able to track how much retraction has occurred across the surface of the brain from each thread. And so we're going to both have more threads in the right layer and have better data on how much retraction has occurred.
The process of going deeper into the brain will allow for more maximization of efficiency and allow for more control and data the Neuralink can use. It also allows them to measure the average distance of retraction so they can be more accurate for future surgeries.
I mean, it's really difficult. Like the Neuralink device is something that really absolutely minimizes damage to the brain, absolutely minimizes the load on the patient, and the goal is to allow someone to live a completely normal life. You won't even notice that someone even has the device. So, like I said, restoring the ability to control your computer and phone, that's how telepathy, and then next device being able to allow people to see that could not see before. And in fact, you could allow people to see, kind of like Geordi LaForge in Star Trek, in whatever
infrared.
Yeah, infrared, ultraviolet, radar, So, so I think another way of saying it is that we want to give people superpowers. So it's not just that we're restoring your prior brain functionality, but that you actually have functionality far greater than a normal human. That's a super big deal.
And I also think, oftentimes the questions that we get a lot is, why do you have to actually go into the brain? What if you place it on the surface or outside the skull? Basically, the long story short, the physics of how it works, you really need to get the sensors, which are these placing in the brain, next to the source, which is neuron, as close to it as possible. Otherwise, what you get is you get a population response and not be able to kind of do the level of controls that we believe.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a good sort of analogy would be like if you're trying to understand what goes on in a factory, you kind of need to go into the factory. You can't just put a stethoscope on the wall and try to figure out what's going on. Like anything on the outside of the trying to read things from the outside is like putting a stethoscope on the wall of a factory trying to understand what's going on in the factory. It's not going to be effective.
Elon and his team are eventually trying to bring technology and humanity together, which in turn will unlock a very sci-fi type future. Merging ourselves with advanced tech will allow us to be somewhat like a superhero, which is incredibly scary, but also what I believe is an inevitable future.
Yeah, I mean, we're currently at approximately 10 bits per second peak rate, but ultimately we want to get to megabit, and I think, say, ultimately whole brain interface, I think, many years from now, I think gigabit level is possible. So that's pretty astonishing. Now, this is still version 1 of our device. As we mentioned, it's version 1 with only 15% of the threads working. The current device has 64 threads with 16 electrodes on each thread. Our next device has 128 threads with 8 electrodes per thread. Because as we get more confident about where exactly to place the thread, you need fewer electrodes per thread. So we can essentially, with the current device, without substantial changes, potentially double the bandwidth if we are accurate with the placement of the threads. And then our next generation device will have maybe
even more channels.
Yeah. So
3,000 and the bigger.
Yeah, so next device we're aiming for 3,000 channels. So this will just keep getting better and better, really moving up, I think, in orders of magnitude in factors of 10, basically, in what kind of bandwidth. So I think it won't be all that long before someone with a Neuralink device can communicate faster than someone who has a fully functional body. And
again, the idea of advancing humanity past our biological limitations is what allows us to advance much faster. Currently, accessing data is limited by biological measures, aka our brain, but if we had Google-type knowledge in our brains, we could really just advance extremely fast and unlock massive benefits for humanity, like extended life and possibly even immortality.
The current input devices are centered around human hands.
Yep.
So it's like we've got these little meat sticks that we move, and there's a certain rate at which you can move your fingers, and so we've got like the mouse and the keyboard and or the joystick control, like Xbox controller or something like that. But you really don't need that. You can actually you don't need, since you're no longer, if you're not trying to use your hands, you actually don't need those conventional control mechanisms. And so this is why, ultimately, I think you'll be able to do conceptual telepathy, where you can communicate entire concepts uncompressed to someone else with a Neuralink or to the computer.
The increase in productivity that telepathy would bring is amazing. Some people type extremely slow, while others type extremely fast. If all you have to do was think, and then the desired action occurred, work would be completed at a much faster rate.
Can a Neuralink chip repair the paralysis in the long term? We can't do that right now. We have done sort of preliminary work implanting a second Neuralink in the spinal cord, and we can restore naturalistic looking hand and leg movements in animal models. But this isn't something that is, don't hold your breath waiting for it. It's going to be a while. We've got a lot of work to do. But yes, there's no reason in theory that we can't repair paralysis.
Yeah. Essentially to I mean, there's no physics barrier to fully solving paralysis. That is perhaps a way to say it. That you've got signals coming from your motor cortex that if they are transferred past the point where the nerves are damaged, essentially it's basically a communications bridge. So you bridge the communications from the motor cortex past the point in the neck or spine where the nerves are damaged, and you should, like, it is possible from a physics standpoint to restore full body functionality. From a physics standpoint, it's a very hard technical problem, but there is nothing that prevents it happening from a physics standpoint.
Curing paralysis would be a major milestone for humanity as a whole, and one that I thought would have been impossible just a few years ago. The Neuralink chip can really change our lives as a species for the better if done properly. It's pretty awesome to see.
Device implantation really needs to become almost entirely, if not entirely, automatic. In the same way that, say, LASIK eye surgery is done, you don't have an ophthalmologist with a laser cutter by hand. That would be crazy. But the ophthalmologist oversees the LASIK machine and makes sure that the settings are correct. And then the machine does everything and restores your eyesight. It's really remarkable how many people have had their eyesight restored with LASIK, and I think there's another one called Smile. They keep making it better. We need to have something similar for a Neuralink implantation, so that you basically sit down and whatever whatever kind of upgrades or brain fixes are needed, that's reviewed by a medical expert. Obviously, we want to make sure that is reviewed correctly, but it really needs to be automatic. So you sit down, and within 10 minutes, you have a Neuralink device installed. Very, very fast. I mean, it's very sort of cyberpunk, Deus Ex if you played those games.
With correct automation and the rapidity of the process, I could see Neuralink easily becoming a necessary step in humanity for people to keep up with the enhanced Neuralink individuals, essentially again becoming more and more cyborg-like.
I think an exciting possibility long-term also is to say, if you take parts of the Optimus humanoid robot and you combine that with a Neuralink, let's say somebody has lost their arms or legs, we could actually attach an Optimus arm or Optimus legs and do a Neuralink implant so that the motor commands from your brain that would go to your biological arms now go to your robot arms or robot legs, and again you'd have basically cybernetic superpowers.
Actually, so the latency from the Neuralink to your hand would probably be slightly faster than it is just to go to your physical hand. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine, like, if you're a piano player or anything that requires extremely fast hand movements, that you could actually have a pretty imbalanced right hand robotic arm control versus left hand physical arm control. That's one of them.
Yeah, like I said, it's just kind of a cyberpunk Deus Ex future where you have cybernetic upgrades that are actually better than your biological limbs.
It's a wild, wild future ahead of us, and Neuralink is just one of the new awesome innovations that could change the lives of many. Really hope you enjoyed the breakdown of this interview, and there will be many more to come. Thanks for watching, and consider subscribing for more interesting tech and AI interview summaries. And remember, keep your mind strong and your curiosity stronger. Till next time.